Guys, this was my most successful reading month ever. Hey y'all, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today, and for this video we are going to be doing my August wrap-up. Before we get into anything bookish, however, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comments how many books did you read this month. Yeah, like I just said, this may be my most successful reading month ever. The only other month that I think can hold up is like last June or maybe 2 Junes ago. I read like 20 books, but that was because a lot of them were graphic novels. It definitely bumped my number. Nope. Not this time around. I have one singular graphic novel. Everything else were traditional novels. So continuing into my stats, this month I read 17 books. I can't believe that. Across those, I read 6,200 pages. That definitely has to be my highest monthly page count ever. As per usual, that page number does include converting audiobook hours to pages, but in terms of audiobook hours, I listened to roughly 115. Thankfully, with all these books, my average rating for the month was still fairly high, 3.94 stars. Unfortunately though, I did have 3 DNFs. As far as my goals for myself go, I did not complete my big book. I did not read a nonfiction book, but I did thankfully have 1 comic. Now jumping into my genre breakdown, I had 9 romances this month, 3 horrors, 1 fantasy, 2 historicals, 1 graphic novel, and 1 contemporary. Now before we get into all of my reviews, I do have a bit of a question for you guys. So with all of the books I read this month, a lot of them I'm actually not going to talk about in this wrap-up because I read them for specific reading vlogs coming out in the future. With that, I have started to consider maybe instead of doing monthly wrap-ups, I should try recent reads like every 2 to 3 months, and that way those videos will only be talking about books I didn't specifically read for vlogs. I'm not sure if I'm gonna do that. I'm curious about what you guys think. Should I go for the recent reads? Do you like doing monthly wrap-ups more? Do you care that I don't talk about these books in my wrap-ups, but do talk about them in reading vlogs? Yeah, I'm just curious. Let's have a conversation about this in the comments down below. So now, in terms of a layout this month, I thought it would be fun to go via genres, since specifically I read a lot of romance books. Starting out, the first romance book I read this month was Holly Jolly Diwali by Sonia Lally, and I'm not going to be talking about this one here, but it is going to be talked about in a reading vlog in like December, maybe? Next up was Lizzie Blake's Best Mistake by Maisie Eddings, and I read this one for a ARC reading vlog, which is going to be coming out next Monday, actually. After that, I read 2 romance books as a part of the final book support group 48-hour readathon, which I have a vlog for, and I'll put a link to that over here if you're interested in more thoughts. First was First Love Take 2 by Sajani Patel. I also have a future reading vlog planned for this one, not talking about it either. The first book I can officially talk about here is Well Matched by Jen DeLuca, which I also read in that 48-hour readathon. Now this one is the 3rd in the Well Met series and caught me up for the time being in this series. I really enjoyed this. I was kind of surprised given the fact that I went into this knowing the main trope is fake dating. Specifically in this one we are following April, who is the sister of Emily, the main character in the first book, and then April is asked to fake date Mitch, who is the gym teacher and kind of known as the Scottish Highlander at the Renaissance Fair. He asks if she'll be his fake girlfriend for a family dinner to kind of showcase to his family that he is more serious, he's a little bit more adult, and of course along the way they start to develop feelings for one another. Even though fake dating is not a trope I usually enjoy, I actually think this might be my favorite of the series so far. I really appreciate that we were seeing an older heroine who is a divorcee as our main character. April felt very rounded out and also realistic to her life experiences that we've been told about. The struggles we see her dealing with definitely made this as a romance and her as a heroine stand out to me across all of the other romance books I read this month. I especially loved seeing more of April with her teenage daughter Caitlin. We saw a little bit of the 2 of them in the first and second book, but we definitely see a lot more of their relationship in this one. On the opposite side though with Mitch, I knew I was gonna love him in this one because he was probably one of my favorite side characters in the 2 previous books. He's such a himbo, but he's so dang adorable and lovely, but we were finally able to see past that happy exterior from the first 2 books. Although Although we don't see from the men's point of views in these series, I do think, especially with Mitch, he was still a very well created and executed character, and he had some very strong development throughout this book. The little bit we saw of them in the second book had me so excited because they have fantastic banter. They play off each other really well. They're constantly cracking jokes at the other's expense, and I was so here for it. Thankfully, that continued here, and the chemistry was just as good. However, once we hit that first spicy scene, ooh, it got even better. After that, the sexual tension was also just impeccable. Since it is fake dating, I must admit that some of the inner monologuing when it came to this whole back and forth of, oh, does he really like me? Oh, is that just because of this part we've played? Drove me insane, but I always will appreciate a one bed trope. And again, the chemistry was just very hard to deny. However, I will say the pacing overall and the plot was kind of all over the place, which definitely took me a little bit out of the story because we're bouncing back and forth between Mitch's family story, April trying to renovate her house, the fair going on, and then Caitlin, her daughter, is actually graduating from high school, so there was just a lot of balls in the air. It just started to feel a little disjointed and didn't flow quite as well. All in all, though, I really enjoyed this one. It was so stinking cute, and now I'm just doubly excited for the fourth book, Well Traveled, which comes out in December. So after that one, the next romance book I read was Grin and Beard It by Penny Reid. This is the second book in the Winston Brothers series, which I've been very excited to continue, and I'm so glad I finally did. Now I'm kind of obsessed. In this one, we are following Jethro, who is the oldest of the Winston boys, and has kind of self-exiled into the Rocky Mountains. He is a park ranger and has been celibate for the past 5 years. On the opposite side, we also have Sienna Diaz, who is a comedian. She is plus size, she's Latina. She is so freaking funny. Sienna was truly the highlight of this book for me, but she is actually filming a movie in this area, and she and Jethro end up interacting one morning, and guys, like, from that first interaction, I was hooked. This was a very high 4 stars for me. Penny Reid had me falling in love with both of these characters all over again. The Winston family truly has my heart, but like I said, Sienna really just made this book for me. I was a little concerned about that given the fact that having an actress who's a comedian, she was consistently genuinely funny. There was constant cracking jokes. She was very lighthearted. She utilized humor as a coping mechanism. She speaks her mind in a way that is both hilarious while also eloquent, and she stands up for what she believes in without coming across as too serious. As a character, she was just incredibly well nuanced, completely fleshed out, and she had solid development throughout this book. I'll also say I think Reid handled both Sienna's plus size and her ethnicity very well in a respectable way, but I will link a few Own Voices reviewers in the description down below. On the opposite side, with our Winston boy this time around, Jethro, I was a little hesitant going into this one because we actually don't see much of him in the first book, so I didn't really have much of a basis for his character in comparison to all of the other Winston boys. But he also quickly won my heart. He was swoony, charismatic, has a little touch of trauma just like all the other brothers, but I found myself growing more and more attached to him as the book progressed. Together with Sienna, they had fantastic chemistry, so much hilarious banter because of Sienna's constantly cracking jokes. They were really flirty with one another, which I think also just helped with that chemistry. Once we get into the spice, guys, this woman knows what she's doing. Both of their personalities just complemented each other so well, and I think that goes in with something I really love about Penny Reid's work is she makes fantastic character dynamic. Though I will admit that in terms of a relationship developing, this goes a little fast for my taste, but given the circumstances of the book and the fact that I loved everything else, I can kind of ignore that. With Sienna being a celebrity, I also think that that added to the plot pretty well. It played into the story and some of the drama, but it didn't take over. I also appreciate that real issues were raised in regards to Sienna's fame affecting their relationship, and unsurprisingly, it does play a part in the third act conflict. But I will say the third act conflict was resolved quite easily with a very simple conversation, and it didn't seem super overdramatic and overplayed. I forgot how much I loved the small town setting in the first book, but I think that's another part in these books that really shines is the atmosphere Reid creates. I also just adored seeing more of this family, seeing them all interact and hang out together. I will say, in regards to the sort of ongoing side plot revolving around the Winston boy's father, who was once a captain of a motorcycle gang, not much development in that department, which I was a little bummed about because that whole drama just makes me want to eat popcorn. But other than that, I really enjoyed this one. 4 stars, 4 chili peppers also. Oh my god. And then just remember, we're eventually going to come back to the Winston boys. Next up, as a part of the rom-com readathon, I read multiple romance books. Shocking, I know. I have a vlog for that whole readathon, and I'll put a link to that in the cards as well. First up was Love and Other Disasters by Anita Kelly, and you're gonna have to go watch that vlog for now because official review will be coming out in a video in the future. After that one, I attempted to read The Flip Side by James Bailey and unfortunately ended up DNFing this. I actually just realized I don't even think I officially took the time to write out a review on my Notion page. Basically, I just did not like what this main character was. He was so whiny, he was so obnoxious. I hated the fact that he's throwing away all of this time and money to search for a woman he literally spends 30 minutes max talking to. And also there were just certain logical things that would come up that I was like, that doesn't make sense, or that's totally ridiculous. Anyway, yeah, I DNF'd this one. I did not enjoy it. I got fairly far in. 215 pages. This is getting unhauled. The last romance book I read for that readathon was Beard Science by Pitty Reed. I told you we were going to be coming back to the Winston boys. This one specifically is following Cletus, who is the third oldest, and he's kind of known as the oddball of the family. All of the Winston boys, however, know that Cletus is vindictive and manipulative and a scary genius. On the opposite side, we have Jennifer, who is known to the town as the banana cake queen. Her parents run this bakery and she is the face of it, but she does not enjoy doing it. She ends up accidentally recording Cletus doing something incriminating and utilizes that video to blackmail him into helping her become more of what a man wants, and unsurprisingly, they slowly start to fall in love. I loved Cletus from his first introduction in the first book, and that never changed. This book just made my love of him grow so much more. It was swoony, hilarious, addictive. Yeah, this one is probably my favorite in the series right now. As I said, Reid is a master of character work and dynamics between them. I was just so wrapped up in the romance, in the chemistry between these two, and the banter. I laughed, I cried, I squealed over this couple. Jennifer is actually the kind of female character that most of the time I don't really enjoy. She's meek, she's quiet, she's afraid to stand up for herself. She really just jumped off the page and her development felt so well handled. The toxic relationship she has with her parents really was just tugging at my heartstrings, and Cletus not being the one to save her but being the one to help her find her voice and stand up to her parents just made me love him all the more. Given the fact that Jennifer is a virgin heroine, this is a little less spicy than the two previous books, but still 3 chili peppers. Although I complained in the second book that there wasn't enough of the Iron Wraiths side plot, this definitely had that. Something that really surprised me with this one though is this is not the first series of romance books I've read. Obviously, I've read many romance series at this point, but I don't think I've ever read another where I felt that the side characters and their romances still shined in the books where they're not the main characters. This book got me so excited about the hate to love relationship between Beau and Shelley in the 4th book, and even more excited for Billy and Claire in the 5th and 6th. I even got the urge to go reread the 1st book because I just loved seeing the little bits of Jessica and Dwayne. The cozy atmosphere continued to just lend so well to these romances. Like I said, I just love the setting of this small Appalachian town. I think on the whole, this book just literally encapsulated everything Reid does so well with her writing. 5 stars, so freaking good. Up there for one of my favorites of the month. So going off that one, I then continued into Beard in Waiting, which is kind of a 3.5. It is a short story following 2 characters, one of which we are introduced in the 1st book and another in the 3rd, interacting. You would not guess who they are. It's kind of romancy, and I think it actually lends into 4.5, whatever the other mid book is. I enjoyed this one. It definitely got my mouth watering for that next book. I'm intrigued. It's got some more mature characters, which has me interested to see how Reid writes them. Went with 4 stars on that one. And finally, for that series at this time is Beard in Mind, which is the 4th book following Beau, the twin of the main character in the 1st book, Dwayne. Now, I guess I should introduce. Beau is a bit of a player, or at least that's what everyone believes. He's such a flirt that he has this reputation of breaking hearts left and right. However, he falls ass over tea kettle for Shelley, the new mechanic mechanic at the garage that Cletus and the twins own. As I said, we see a little bit of their back and forth in the third book, and it turns out that Beard Science and Beard and Mind actually take place at the exact same time. So with that, there is a little bit of the same events going on, you just see them through a different person's perspective. And something I realized in this book, going off a thought from the last, is I'm so impressed at how Reid brings so much attention to these side characters going to have their own books in the future. We really don't see that much of Beau in the first two books, but he is a lot more prevalent in the third. In this fourth one, we see a lot more of Roscoe, the youngest brother, who is the main character in the fifth. As I said, Beau is a flirt. He's so dang charming, but he is genuinely very sweet and kind. He's just a bundle of joy, and that made me so happy for this opposites attract, with the kind of rain cloud character being the female. Shelley's prickly and aloof and sharp-tongued when we first meet her, and because of that, I, again, loved the dynamic between these two. Though I will admit, seeing as how this does kind of play into that hate to love trope, I do think the first book did it better than this one did. One thing I was pretty upset about was, unfortunately, this one doesn't really have much of a split perspective. We spend a majority of this book in Beau's perspective. We do see occasional chapters in Shelley's mind, but not enough. Every time we would see from her perspective, I really enjoyed it. I would grow so much more connected to her as a character, but unfortunately that just did not happen enough for my liking. With that, and the hate to love thing, I do think I wasn't quite as convinced by their romance in the beginning, but once they are officially a couple, we get a lot more of those intimate, caring moments between the two of them, and those are what really had me fawning for them. Always can expect some good spice. I think this one did bump back up to a 4 chili pepper. I also am sad to say that I think this might be the first where there were just a bit too many side plots going on. There was even more of the Iron Wraith's side storyline that connects all of the books, but there's an additional element with it. Not to mention, as I said, this takes place at the same time as the third book, so you're seeing a little bit more of those plots happening from a different perspective. Beau is basically just juggling a whole lot during this book, which also made me even more upset that we weren't seeing from Shelley's perspective, because in her mind, it really seemed like we only had two main plots: the romance and her mental health. Although every one of these books does have some heavier topics, this one definitely had the most serious tone, and that's definitely attributed to the fact that Shelley, our female main character, has OCD. I do think that element helped this one to stand out from the rest of the series, and with that, Reid comments in the acknowledgements that she took from her own experiences and struggles with OCD, but also talked to many other sufferers to give the most accurate portrayal possible. Shelley's thoughts can be really difficult to read at times, but I also felt as though the exploration of them was done in such a well-handled and respectful way. I really appreciated that from Beau's perspective, we see that this isn't something that can simply be fixed. It's not that easy. It is a mental illness which will be with her for most of her life, but from seeing her struggles, he actually learns about some things he can utilize to handle his own baggage. Across the board, I spent majority of this book either squealing or on the verge of crying. This one came out to another high 4 stars. Okay, that is it for the romances. Now let's talk about the horror books I read this month. Forewarning, I'm not going to give full reviews for any of these. First up was All's Well by Mona Awad, and I'll just say I really enjoyed this one. This might be my favorite of the month, I'm not sure yet. Next was A Cosmology of Monsters by Shaun Hamill, and unfortunately I DNF'd this one. Was not enjoying it. I went through a recurring cycle of I'm liking this is strange, I don't like this, dang it, something shocking just happened and I'm pulled back to liking it. That happened 3 times. After that, I read A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson, and I also really enjoyed this one. And then finally it was My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones, and this was kind of hard to follow at times, but I think I enjoyed it. Lots of pop culture references. I'll leave it at that. Next up is the one fantasy book I read this month, and that was An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. I've talked about this a few times now, and I bought this copy for a friend. Before I give it to her though, I told her I was gonna read it, and let me start out by giving you the summary. This is a standalone fantasy in which we are following a young woman who is a painter, and her biggest clients are usually fae. One day she's actually commissioned to do a piece of this fae prince, but she actually showcases him with sadness in his eyes, and in this world that is a no-no. She is not allowed to showcase any of the fae with human emotions. So she is then taken into the fairy realm to be punished, and of course along the way she starts to fall in love with this fae prince. I was mostly intrigued to pick this up after I heard Hannah at A Clockwork Reader praise Sorcery of Thorns by the same author, so I thought I'd try her stuff out here. This did not work out for me. I'll start positive. My biggest thing is I think the atmosphere in this book was impeccable. Solid 10 on Copile. I was really transported into this beautiful magical forest that they were searching through with all of these different beings that are trying to kill me left and right. Unfortunately, everything else though was just really underwhelming. The characters were fine, I just didn't feel as though they were well established or well developed by the end of the book. The romance between the two was just so understated, especially seeing as how the beginning interactions are all glossed over in summaries. If you're going to do that, I really need to feel that chemistry in every other interaction, particularly if she's already starting to have feelings for him by the time we're really seeing those interactions. It also just made it seem doubly cheesy whenever a L-bomb was dropped because I didn't feel their romance at all. The plot just seemed really simplistic, honestly. I just wanted more from it. And the twists that took place, all glaringly obvious to me. I saw them coming from a mile away. And because of that, I didn't feel like there were very high stakes. The world building was very tell, not show. There would be lots of just drops here and there with no explanation, no background, no understanding of why they were this way. In the end, I just didn't really like this one. It was a letdown. I gave it 2.5 stars. I still continue to not really understand the Fae thing. I'm sorry, I don't get it. After fantasy, I had two historical books. First up was A Dreadful Splendor by B.R. Myers, and that is going to be in the same ARC reading vlog coming out on Monday. After that one was Bad Girls Never Say Die by Jennifer Matthew. Also not going to talk about this one here. I have a specific reading vlog planned for this, but this is a Outsiders feminist retelling set in 1960s Texas, and I will say I did enjoy it. Definitely very similar to 𝗖cie. If you enjoyed 𝗖cie, I think you could enjoy this. In regards to my comic book this month, I read volume 1 of Spider-Gwen Greater Power by Jason Latour, illustrated by Robbie Rodriguez. I continue to absolutely love the color palette utilized in this run, but I will say there is a different artist for issue 5, and that shift caught me so off guard. This felt a lot more cohesive and flowed so much better as a story in comparison to volume 0, but given that that's more of an introduction, I guess that also makes sense. We really get to see so much more of Gwen as a character in this bind-up. We see that struggling between her cocky, laid-back, having fun attitude while also being blamed for her best friend's death. It just felt so much more expanded upon in this one. There was also some more development of Gwen's father now that he knows she is a vigilante. I'd really just love more time with the two of them interacting, working together on solving crimes, or just laying back, hanging out, being father-daughter. But something that is always my favorite is seeing how characters from the 616 universe differ compared to these. So in this bind-up, we actually got to see Harry and his rendition of Green Goblin in this universe. Her mentor-mentee relationship with Jessica Drew, Spider-Woman in the 616, is also just fantastic and adorable. On top of all of those, we are also introduced to this universe's Captain America, who is Samantha Wilson, and oh my gosh, A, love her, but B, I love seeing that parallel between this Gwen and her cap versus 616 Peter and his cap. I think it was just so much more valuable to utilize that page time to develop and build on Gwen's relationships with the people who influence her in both her personal life and her superhero life, in comparison to her bandmates, who we see a ton of in both volume 0 as well as the Shaun and Maguire run. Across the board, I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars, and I cannot wait for the next bind-up. Finally, the one contemporary I read this month was Dial A for Aunties by 𝗖cienih/𝗁𝗁, and again, not going to talk about this one in this video, I'm sorry, but I will say it was freaking hilarious, chaotic, crazy, all over the board, but I had such a fun time reading it. Really hoping to get to the next one here soon. And then finally, the one other book I have to talk about today is my final DNF, which was Rubbernecker by Belinda Bauer. This was the pick for the personal book club I do with a few friends, and unfortunately, I just could not get into this. This story alternates perspectives between a coma patient, one of his terrible nurses, and then a medical student who has autism. Even by the point I was at, I wasn't really sure what the connection was between all three of them. I knew there was some kind of a mystery going on, but it didn't feel like it was really getting developed all that much. Unfortunately, the autistic character just consistently felt like he was being shit on by everybody in his life, and that was just really depressing. So yeah, unfortunately, I ended up not finishing this. And that is kind of a sad note to end on, but thank you so much for coming to my channel today, guys. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. I have all my socials linked in the description if you're interested in keeping up with what I am reading. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!